Hey, welcome back to the Secret Underground Lair. So today we are going to be mounting the hinges, or the drawer slides, and hopefully we'll get to a rough assembly, final assembly of the console table. That's today's adventure. I had to do a little bit of fine tuning on this notch on the back of the drawer. And one thing I wanted to point out is this very small little piece that we have here, which is why I wanted to make sure the drawers were glued together before I cut this notch. So that would this little piece here would just be hanging by a 1/16 or 1/8 of an inch there. Wouldn't have worked. But with it all glued together, it works just fine. So now I'm getting into kind of the fine tuning of where to place the drawer slides. And you can see I've got some playing cards in the mix here. And what I have learned is that 20 playing cards will give me 1/4 of an inch. At least with this deck. I'm not saying that's a universal truth, but this deck gives me 20 cards equals 1/4 of an inch, which means 5 cards gives me a 1/16 of an inch, which is the measurement that I need from the bottom of this drawer to the top of the drawer slide in order to give me an 1/8 of an inch clearance from this surface of the drawer slide to the bottom of the drawer. So there's it doesn't look like it, but that's an 1/8 of an inch gap there. And that's the clearance that the drawers will have on the top of the shelf that they're going to be sitting on. So positioning the drawer slides then, I'm going to have 5 cards under each drawer slide. I'm going to push them to the back of the drawer so that they'll be mounted here. And then we can figure out the positioning on the shelf where the holes are going to be, these holes here, through which a machine screw will come through the bottom of the shelf and into these holes. That's going to be a little bit tricky, but it's doable. So I'm going to mount the drawer slides now onto the drawers. Yeah, that's our next tack. I'll set the camera up so you can see that happening. So I've got the drawer slide sitting on a stack of 5 cards. That gives me the 1/16 of an inch clearance off the bottom of the drawer. I have it pushed right up tight against the back edge. Main reason for doing that actually is to make sure that the drawer slides are consistent right across. I can't be certain that the holes that I drilled are in exactly the right place, so I'm using the drawer slide itself as my guide. Got a little Robertson screw, putting it in the hole that we drilled in the slide, and just going to screw that right in. That's in place now. I can move this out of the way and put our second screw in this end. Remove our cards. There we are. That moves nice and freely both directions. Soft close feature works. So we'll do the same thing on the other side of this drawer and then continue on with the remainder of the drawers. I'll come back when I have all the slides in place. So there's the look we're going for. I just have the legs over here just kind of set on, just to kind of help me understand and visualize where the top is going to sit. The top is just sitting on top of the drawers. I've got some playing cards stuck in place to give me the gap that I want. But you can see how an 1/8 of an inch, that's going to line up pretty nicely all the way across. So understanding that, I'm now going to get the shelf portion glued together completely and I'm going to mount the drawer slides, the drawers, onto the shelf. So we'll mark where the slides are going to go, drill those holes, and then get the shelves mounted on, or the drawers mounted on the shelf. That's where we are now. So I've gone through and got all my measurements, and you'd think that they'd all be the same, but apparently not. Even though these drawer slides are the same, from the same manufacturer, made the same way, whatnot, the left and the right are different. So, and they're different in dimensions that I didn't touch. So I can't blame myself for making a mistake here. These are just quirks of manufacture. So, for example, both of the slides on this drawer are butted up tight against the back edge. But what I find is that the distance from the front to that hole and the front to that hole are different. In fact, it's pretty much visible. You can see the difference there. And that is true for every left and right pair. So I've had to make some compensation. Well, I haven't made compensation. I've identified that in all of the markings that I'm going to make. So for example, yeah, I got 1 1/4 here, and I got 1 3/16. So 1 1/4 on this slide and 1 3/16 on that slide. So that's the type of thing. The good news is the distance between here and here is consistent, and the distance between here and here, here and here is also consistent. So I'm happy with that. It's just where these holes are relative to the front face of the drawer that has some variation. So that makes it a little more challenging. Next little bit that I'm going to be doing is, of course, I'll flip the drawer over. I'm just going to move this out of the way so you can see what happens next. So when the drawer flips over, I'm going to wind up having to drill a hole, probably be about here and probably about here. Now the challenge, of course, is that that hole is going to come through the bottom rail. So it means then that I'll probably have to put a little pocket screw. I'll drill a little pocket hole on the bottom side of this that'll go up to catch the drawer slide. A little bit of a complication, not a major one, but just adds a little bit more to the challenge of the mechanism. So next thing that I'm going to do is permanently attach the sides, the rails to the shelf, and then I can start drilling the holes. So I'm going to get that set up, have a bite of lunch, and then carry on when this has been set. So our drawer shelf is now glued together. The rails are glued onto the shelf itself. I can now drill the holes, and then we'll give everything another sand. But before I start drilling the holes in that, I'm going to glue together the bottom rails and shelf together, so that can be set up, and the glue can be setting up while we're working on the shelf, and then we're that much closer to doing an assembly. Okay, that's that shelf done. Of course, there'll be some sanding, maybe even a little bit of planing on this just to kind of get it ready for final assembly. But that's a good step. So I'm going to just set this aside. Now I'll go back to working on screw holes for the drawers and the drawer slides. So I have the drawer shelf oriented the way the drawers facing me will be. The front of the shelves, the drawers facing you are going to be the back of the shelf. And I have the measurements for all of those, so let's just see what we get here. I'm going to start with a 1 5/8. By the way, I just sharpened my pencil so that I can make a little bit more precise marks. And 5/8. 18 3/16. 31 1/4. I'm just going to use the square coming off the front side to draw some light lines from front to back. Okay, now the tricky bit is the holes on each drawer are going to be slightly different. Okay, our holes are marked. Now I'm going to drill these holes just slightly oversized from the number 8 machine screw that we're going to be using, because I would like to have just a little bit of wiggle room to move the shelves, to move the drawers around a little bit should we need to move them. So these are our machine screws. They're number 8 by 1 inch, 832. And I'm just going to see if this little washer will do the job. Yes. I'm going to add a little washer onto the top of every one just to give a little bit more purchase on the underside of the shelf. Okay. That's what we need for the drawer hardware. Now, pick a drill bit. So I'm going to go with a 3/16 bit. Okay. We are center punched and ready to drill. As I mentioned before, on the front screws, we're going to be drilling right through into the rail, so we're going to have to use a Forstner bit to make a little pocket on the underside, because these screws aren't long enough, and quite frankly, I don't want to make these visible from the front. So a little pocket will make a difference. Now this little jig is not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a little better than I can do when holding it by hand. So I'm going to drill all of the back holes first, and then I'm going to prop something underneath the front, and we'll do the front bits. that gives that size hole, 3/16, just gives this bolt, little machine screw, a little bit of play. So I think that'll be okay. Still enough to make a good purchase with the washer on it. So that's all the holes drilled, top down. Now we're going to make the Forstner bit cuts up from the bottom. That'll be a 10mm hole. I think I'm actually going to make that a little bigger than 10mm. 10mm will be big enough, but it won't allow the screw head to move around very much. So I might go up to a 1/2 inch. 10mm is kind of my go-to for any kind of pocket screw, pocket hole that I'm doing. And I'm going to put a little piece of tape on here to mark the depth that I want to go. All right, let's give this a try. That'll do just nicely. Okay, holes are drilled. I'm going to give this a light sand just to get rid of the burrs around it. And then let's try and mount some drawers on this. Okay. We're now ready to try and mount a drawer slide. Let's see how this works. Let's just see what we can do in terms of lining this one up. In theory, it should work like this. What do you know? Worked. Okay, a little bit of an issue there. So I found the problem with this drawer slide. And what you can see on the drawer slide is there's a little pin here. And the purpose of that pin is to catch this little orange mechanism that then triggers the soft close. When that comes out, and then the drawer slides all the way out. The problem that I'm having is that little pin just touches the welded on nut. Just barely hits the outside of it. So I'm going to use a file and just grind that down, or file that down, so that we don't have any binding anymore. I'll be back in a minute. Okay, just filed down that welded on nut. And we have good clearance now. So I'll put the drawer slide back in. Let's make this work. So our first drawer over here still has a little bit of binding on it. So when we take everything apart, we'll take some steps to address that. But I'm going to put on our second drawer now, the middle drawer. Okay, it's 2 drawers in. That one works perfect. Put on the third. So I have one hole, the one up here, is just appears to be off a little bit to the toward the center. So I'm just going to drill that out a little bit with a slightly larger hole. Another issue over here with the drawer slide, just touching the welded nut. So it's kind of funny, our 2 outside drawer slides need a little bit of tuning. But that has our drawer slides in, our drawers in, and spacing is pretty good. Looks like I have a slightly larger gap between these two than these two, so I'll see if I can move this over a smidge. Not out by much. Let's measure 1/8 of an inch. A little snug on that side, a little loose on this side. I don't think so. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to drill these out to be slightly larger holes. That'll give me a little bit of room that I need. I'm going to bring you around this side so you can see how these drawer slides are attached. So these are the holes that we drilled with our Forstner bit to get through the bottom thickness of the lower rail. And these are the holes that went straight through. So that's an 8/32 by 8/32 1-inch machine screw. That goes into the welded nut on the other side. So we have a series of those across the bottom. Those of course won't be visible because it's on the underside of a cabinet. These are buried, these are going into the front of the drawer, the back of the drawer. Front drawer, back of drawer, front of drawer, back of drawer, so on. All the way along. And these little anomalies here are the result of the manufacture of the drawer slides, where they are out by a little bit from left to right. That was an annoyance. If it wasn't for that, it would look really good. So fortunately, this is all buried away on the underside and nobody's going to see that. So unless they crawl underneath the cabinet and look up. Okay. So next on the agenda, I think it's going to be a little bit more sanding. This will be the final sand to get the top, you know, where when we glued the shelf together, there's a little bit of glue overage. The shelf and the rail don't meet perfectly all the way across due to variances in the density of the shelf. So we're just going to take a sander and get rid of all of that unevenness. And yeah, we are really close to final assembly. So the top of the cabinet, the console table is done. I'm very happy with the result of that. Boxes are done, the drawers are done. The drawer shelf will need a little bit of sanding, and I'm going to do the same kind of thing on, this is now the lower shelf or the floor of the console table. So where the floor piece itself is not perfectly flat, it's pretty close, but not perfect. And as a result, there's just a little bit of variation between the shelf and the rail. So what I'm doing now is I took a little hand plane, just took off a little bit on the inside edge of the rail. I don't want the outside edge of the rail to be affected by any sanding that's going on, so that'll have a consistent look right across the top. What it does mean though is that the shelf itself, or the floor itself, as it gets to the edge, may lift up just a little bit, but you're going to have to look really close to see that. That's a compromise that I think you need to take. So just more sanding. I'm going to do a little bit of hand sanding in here. I'm not looking to make sure that these edges are absolutely perfectly flush. I am just trying to make sure that they are consistent all the way along on both sides. I have a little bit of a high spot here, so I'm going to deal with that by hand and then finish them off, I think, by hand. See a lot of heavy sandpaper marks in this piece, so I'm just going to go over the whole thing with 180 again with the orbital sander, just to get rid of a couple little scratches that I think are going to show through when we get the final finish. So a quick 180, and we're going to call that done. All right, that's our floor done. All right, going to take the drawers off the lower shelf again, and we'll sand up the shelf, get that to a done state. So the drawers are off. What we're doing is going over the entire piece here with some 180 likely. May do a little 120 first, but certainly 180. There's some glue that is left over from putting on the side rails. I'm also going to drill out these 4 holes to make them slightly bigger to give a little bit of wiggle room for some possible adjustment on this middle drawer. We'll start with that. And now on to sanding. So this is 180 paper. I'm going to switch to 120 to do a little 120 first, then we'll come back to 180. I'm going to switch up to be a little bit more aggressive actually with some 80 grit just to get rid of this, some of the edging here. There's a little bit of unevenness here that I think I've just kind of taken up a lot of time and battery and paper with the 120. So I'll be a little bit more aggressive and then come back with the 120 then 180. Okay, I'm good with that. The reason I'm a little bit more aggressive with the 80 grit paper on this piece is the drawers sit on here, and I want to make sure that particularly the front surface of the front rail, or the top of the rail here, is flush with the shelf, because the bottoms of the drawers are going to be up against that rail. So I don't want to have any variations in the rail compared to the shelf itself. So I'm happy with that result. I'll go back to the 120 and then up to 180. All right, that's the shelf done. I'm going to do a final sand on the legs. And then might just get them glued up tonight. There's one more step that needs to be done on the legs to enable us to connect the top. So I'll get the legs done now, and then we'll probably call that a video for today with final assembly happening tomorrow. Okay, just going to go over all these pieces with 180 and then we're going to glue these legs together. So I ran out of juice on the cordless sander. I switched over to my corded sander, put some 180 grit in it. So we'll just finish up the legs with this. Okay, that's the leg assemblies, the final sand up to 180. So now I'm going to glue them together, clamp them up overnight. Okay, whew. Legs glued together, top done, shelf done, floor done, legs sanded ready, drawers are done. So tomorrow we're going to put the drawers back on the shelf, make that permanent, and then we'll also figure out getting the top shelf, or the top, mounted onto these legs. So thanks very much for watching, everyone. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.